All right, one of the topics that used to confuse me the most when I was just starting out on my journey towards becoming conversational in Spanish was this: how do you say become? It feels like there's so many different ways, and the reality is there are. And that's what we're going to go into in this video, and I'm going to show you the explanation so that it actually makes sense. So, without further ado, the first way to say become is convertirse en, which literally that verb means to convert oneself in. Convertirse, the se means it's reflexive, so we're talking about oneself, not just convert something, but convert oneself in. So convertirse en implies a transformation or a change into a different state or condition, aka becoming a new version, a new state, a new condition. So an example would be, ella se convirtió en una gran líder. She became a great leader. She converted herself into a grand leader. Next one is volverse, and that comes from the verb volverse, so to turn, and it's also used as become, so to turn into. Él se volvió famoso después de la película, which means he became famous after the movie. Again, se volvió, se convirtió. Kind of a similar pattern so far with the first two. Both are reflexive verbs. The third one, again, reflexive. Hacerse is related to the verb hacer, which means to make or to do. Why is there a se at the end of it? Well, hacerse implies the idea of making oneself into something, right? So aka becoming a certain way. Hacer is to make, hacerse is to make oneself. So here's an example. Ella se hizo médica. She made herself a doctor, aka she became a doctor. Next one, llegar a ser. Again, this one's logical. Don't think, oh, got another one to memorize. This one is logical. Llegar means to arrive. Arrive to what? A ser, to being. Arrive at being. You know, it kind of makes a person think about the journey. When you say llegué a ser, it's like I arrived at being. After all this work, llegué a ser doctor or médico. So an example, llegó a ser presidente. He became president. But again, with that context, that nuance of he's been working at it for a while and he finally arrived at being president. So before we move on into the next one, hopefully so far all of these are making sense. Like for example, llegar a ser, I don't want you to memorize that because you don't have to. You don't have to memorize that the sound llegar a ser equals become. Just think of it as literally what the words mean, and you can directly translate it and it makes sense. Next one is ponerse. Poner means to put. Ponerse, again, it's reflexive, so to put on oneself or to become in certain contexts. When used to express a change in a person, it often refers to a sudden or temporary shift in mood, emotion, or condition. So an example, me puse triste al escuchar la noticia. I became sad upon hearing the news. You see this often with emotions. One way that I often see this being used is me puse nervioso. I got nervous. That's how I think about it. Ponerse, I think of I got nervous. So like, me puse nervioso, I got nervous. Or if you tell someone, ponte a trabajar, that means put yourself to work or get to work. Me puse a trabajar, I got myself to working. I got to work. So that's ponerse. The next one is meterse a. Meterse, so meterse a implies getting involved or entering into a particular activity or role, to get into. So meter and poner are kind of synonyms. They both mean to put, but poner means kind of like to put, to place something, whereas meter almost has more of like a to put into. So like meter, like put it into, rather than just put. So meterse a, that's why it means to kind of get involved into a particular activity or role. So let's go into the example. Se metió a bailarín de salsa. He became a salsa dancer. Or you might use it in a context where it's like, you know, someone got into vegetarianism. So you could say, ellos se metieron a vegetarianos. They became vegetarians is what that means, but the context is like they got into being a vegetarian. So that's how I would use meterse a. And finally, last but not least, is echarse a. So similar to meterse a, echarse a also suggests starting or engaging in something new. Se echó a estudiar música. He became interested in studying music. So now that you're aware of all the different ways to say become, where to go from here, practice using these. One thing I like to do is have imaginary conversations in my head. It sounds kind of weird, but I think a lot of you already do that. Just have random like podcast conversations in Spanish, whatever level you're at. I remember when I was at the beginning, I would just try and say whatever I could, and it was frustrating, but it still helped. And of course, if you have access to people who you can actually practice with in real life, use these ways to say become and watch your abilities grow. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope this helped, and I will see you in the next video.